You ever think you know someone so well, you trust them with your life, only to wake up one day and realize they've just handed away the very thing you both worked your entire lives for? That was me, Kenneth, 62 years old, husband. For over 3 decades, father of 2 grown kids, and a man who thought his marriage was built on trust. I didn't see it coming, not in a million years. My wife, the woman I shared my home, my bed, and my dreams with, gave away our inheritance. Not to charity, not to someone in need, but to her brother. And when I confronted her, I told her the words I never thought I'd say. This time, you went too far. Because it wasn't just about the money. It was about betrayal, about disrespect, and about realizing the person you thought you could lean on would rather watch you fall than admit they were wrong. And if you think I just let it slide, let me assure you, you don't know me very well. By the time I was done, the truth had come out in a way no one in my family will ever forget. My name is Kenneth, but everyone calls me Ken. I've lived in the same small town in Ohio for most of my life. My father worked in a steel mill. My mother ran a little bakery, and they taught me 2 things: work hard and protect what's yours. I did both. I started working young, put myself through trade school, built a small construction business from the ground up. I wasn't rich, but I earned enough to give my family a good life. I married Claire when I was 29. She was smart, funny, and had this fierce loyalty to her family that I admired back then. I thought it was one of her best qualities. But loyalty is a double-edged sword. It can be beautiful when it's balanced, but dangerous when it's blind. Over the years, I'd seen how much she cared for her younger brother, Ethan. He was 5 years younger than her, and in her eyes, he could do no wrong. I, however, had a different perspective. I saw a man who was always chasing big dreams without ever doing the hard work to get there. He jumped from one business idea to another, always on the verge of a big breakthrough, but somehow always broke. And every time he failed, guess who was there to bail him out? Claire, and by extension, me. At first, it was little things covering a rent payment, helping him with a car repair. But over the years, the amounts got bigger. And every time I protested, Claire would say, "It's my brother, Ken. Family helps family." Fast forward to last year. My parents had both passed, and I received my inheritance, a mixture of savings, some bonds, and a small cabin upstate. That had been in the family for generations. It wasn't millions, but it was a safety net, something I worked my whole life to make sure we'd have for retirement. Claire and I had talked for years about traveling once I slowed down my business. Italy, Alaska, maybe even Australia. That inheritance was going to make it all possible. At least that's what I thought. The day it happened was like any other. I came home from work, tired but in a good mood. Claire was in the kitchen, looking nervous. I could tell something was off, but she brushed it off, saying she had a headache. Later that night, as I was going through some paperwork in my office, I noticed something strange. The account where I deposited most of my inheritance had a massive withdrawal. Almost all of it was gone. My stomach dropped. I called the bank immediately, thinking there must have been some kind of mistake. There wasn't. The money had been transferred by Claire. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. She just sat there, arms crossed, and said Ethan needed it. His business is about to take off, and he just needed a little push. We'll get it back, Ken. A little push? She'd taken hundreds of thousands of dollars without even talking. To me, I couldn't believe it. My hands were shaking, my voice low but furious. Do you realize what you've done? That was our future, Claire. Our security. And you gave it to your brother like it was spare change. She didn't flinch. You don't understand. He's family. And family comes first. That's when. I said it without thinking. This time, you went too far. Something inside me broke that night. It wasn't just the money. It was the complete disregard for me, for us. She had made a life-changing decision without me. And in her mind, It was justified because it was for Ethan. I barely slept. My mind was racing, not just with anger, but with a cold, calculating clarity I hadn't felt in years. If she thought I was going to sit back and let this slide, she was wrong. The next morning, I started making calls. I spoke to my lawyer, explained everything, and began looking into exactly what legal rights I had. The good news? The cabin upstate was still in my name only, and the will I'd updated a few years ago, well, that was about to get another update. I didn't tell Claire what I was doing. I played it calm, even distant, because I wanted her to think I was just sulking. In reality, I was laying the groundwork for a surprise she and her brother would never see coming. I also started quietly digging into Ethan's business. I'd heard bits and pieces from Claire over the years, but I'd never looked into it myself. Turns out, it was even worse than I thought. He was running some half-baked import company, operating mostly on debt with no real clients and no sustainable income. The big deal he was supposedly working on? Pure fiction. I knew then there was no way we were ever seeing that money again. And if Ethan thought I was going to just let him walk away with it, he was about to learn something new about me. I'm a patient man, but when you cross me, I don't forget. What happened next? Well, let's just say, by the end of it, I made sure every person involved learned that my kindness was never weakness. And if you stick around, I'll tell you exactly how I turned the tables. And why Claire and Ethan both will think twice before ever trying something like this again. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's quiet, precise, and leaves them wondering how they never saw it coming. If you're still listening, keep going. You're about to hear how I took back control, one step at a time, and left them with nothing but the regret they earned. And trust me, you won't want to miss the ending. Asterisk, I remember sitting there at the dining table long after she had walked away, my hands resting flat on the polished wood, my mind a tangled mess of disbelief and anger. The faint ticking of the clock on the wall felt like it was mocking me, each second hammering in the reality that the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted with everything, had decided it without so much as a discussion to hand over what we had worked decades for to her brother. I kept thinking back to how we had gotten here. Linda and I had been married for 35 years. We met when we were in our 20s, both of us with nothing but big dreams and empty pockets. I worked construction in those early years, rain or shine, winter or summer, with calluses so thick on my hands that even splinters didn't faze me anymore. Linda worked at a small clothing store in town, smiling at customers during the day, and coming home to make dinner at night. Together, we saved every dime we could. We didn't take vacations. We didn't buy fancy cars. We sacrificed. And those sacrifices eventually paid off. When my father passed, he left me a modest inheritance. Not enough to change our lives overnight, but enough to give us a cushion. We didn't touch it, not once. We treated it like sacred ground and emergency fund that could help us in retirement or get us through any storm life might throw our way. Over the years, I invested carefully. A small rental property here, some stocks there. Slowly but surely, that money grew into something substantial. It became our safety net, our shared future dot. So to hear her say she had given it away, just like that, to her brother, of all people, was like being punched in the gut. Her brother, Tom, had always been a sore subject between us. He was the kind of man who could charm a room but couldn't hold down a job for more than a few months. He had a way of making his problems everyone else's problems. And Linda, God bless her heart, had always been his safety net. She'd loan him money sometimes, without telling me, because he just needs a little help to get back on his feet. The problem was, Tom's feet never seemed to land anywhere stable. That night, when she told me, she said it so casually it made my skin crawl. "Kenneth," she began, her voice oddly calm. "I gave the inheritance to Tom. He's starting a business and needed a boost. You understand, right?" "Understand?" I stared at her. unable to speak for several seconds. When the words finally came, they were laced with a quiet rage I didn't even recognize in myself. "You? What?" Her eyes darted away from mine. "He promised he'd pay it back. He just needs a chance. And you know how hard things have been for him lately." I couldn't believe it. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even acknowledging that what she had done was wrong. It was as if she expected me to simply accept it, like it was just another line item in the monthly budget. "Linda," I said slowly, forcing each word out through clenched teeth, "that money wasn't just yours to give. It was ours. And it wasn't meant for your brother's next big gamble. It was meant for us, for our future, for our retirement, for emergencies." She bristled, folding her arms. "Don't make it sound like I'm some kind of thief. I did what I thought was right. He's family." That word family landed like a stone in my chest. Because wasn't I family too? Weren't we supposed to be each other's first priority? The conversation spiraled quickly after that. She accused me of being cold, of not understanding loyalty. I accused her of betrayal, of putting her brother's needs above our marriage. By the end of it, we were both shouting, and she stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I sat there in the dark, staring at nothing, my mind replaying every moment of the past 3 decades. All the nights I come home exhausted, but still picked up extra work. All the times I turned down something I wanted so we could save a little more. And now, in one impulsive decision, it was gone. Over the next few days, I tried to stay calm. I told myself maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounded. Maybe she'd only given him a portion. But when I finally saw the bank statement, my stomach dropped. It wasn't just a portion, it was everything. Every last dollar from that inheritance account was gone. That night, I confronted her again. She didn't even look surprised. "He needed it, Kenneth, and he'll pay us back. You'll see." But deep down, I knew we would never see that money again. I knew Tom. I'd seen this pattern too many times. And what made it worse was knowing that Linda had chosen to trust him over me. The tension in our home grew thick. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was short, clipped sentences. She spent more time at her sister's house, probably to avoid my constant questions. And me? I buried myself in work again, not because I needed the money right away, but because I needed an escape from the gnawing betrayal eating at me from the inside. One evening, a mutual friend stopped by. She hesitated before speaking, but eventually said, "Kenneth, I'm not trying to stir the pot, but I heard Tom talking the other day. He said he's going to use that money for a bar. He said something about finally living the high life." I felt my blood run cold. A bar? That was his grand plan? Not a stable business, not an investment, just another risky venture that would bleed money faster than it came in. And Linda had handed him our entire future to do it. That night, I didn't. Sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every choice I had made for us, every compromise, every sacrifice. And for what? For her to toss it away like loose change? By morning, my anger had shifted into something else. Resolve. If Linda could make choices without me, then I could make choices without her. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I reminded both her and Tom that actions have consequences. Because I wasn't about to let decades of my life's work vanish without a fight. Asterisk, I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the look on Linda's face when I confronted her. That stubborn mix of guilt and pride, as if she knew she had done something wrong, but couldn't admit it. The more I thought about it, the more the betrayal stung. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, respect, and the foundation of everything we built together. We had worked for decades, sacrificed vacations, skipped luxuries, and lived modestly so that one day we could retire comfortably, maybe help our children, and enjoy the fruits of our labor. And now, with a single impulsive decision, she had jeopardized that security. I kept asking myself, does she even see what she's done? The next morning, I didn't even bother making small talk over breakfast. She sat there sipping her coffee, scrolling on her phone, while I stared at the unpaid bills on the table. I finally asked, "Have you spoken to your brother?" She nodded quickly, as if it was nothing. "Yes, he promised he'll pay us back in a few months." I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, humorless laugh. A few months? Linda, the man hasn't paid back a single loan in his life. You know that. We both know that. She just shrugged, as if my concern was overblown. It's family, Kenneth. You don't just turn your back on them. And there it was. That sentence I had heard so many times in our marriage, always in defense of her brother's endless string of mistakes. I decided then and there that I needed to take matters into my own hands. I called her brother directly. He sounded almost cheerful, as if he hadn't just taken our inheritance. "Hey, Ken, I was going to call you," he said. I cut him off. "We need to talk. Where is the money, and when exactly do you plan to return?" "It?" He stammered a bit, then launched into a story about a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity that had already eaten up most of the funds. My stomach dropped. He had already spent it. And the way he talked, it was clear he had no plan to return it, at least not anytime soon. I told him, in no uncertain terms, that this was theft. He tried to turn it around on me, saying, "Linda agreed to it. It's not like I stole it from you." That sentence burned into my brain, because technically, he was right. Linda had handed it over willingly, and that realization hurt more than I can explain. When I told Linda about the call, she got defensive. "He's my brother, Kenneth. I can't just let him drown." My voice shook when I replied, "And I'm your husband. Or does that mean nothing to you anymore?" She looked away, her silence answering my question. That was the moment something inside me broke. I realized we weren't on the same team anymore. We weren't even playing the same game. The next few days were tense. We barely spoke. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten here. I kept thinking about the years I spent working double shifts, missing my kids' school plays, putting off my own dreams, all so we could have that nest egg. And now it was gone. Just like that. My friends would tell me, "It's just money, Kenneth." But they didn't understand. It wasn't just money. It was decades of hard work, of discipline, of building something with the person you thought would always have your back. It was our future. One evening, I overheard Linda on the phone with her brother again. She was telling him not to worry. About me, that I'd calm down eventually. Hearing those words was like a slap in the face. She wasn't even taking me seriously. She thought this was just me blowing off steam, like I'd eventually roll over and accept it. But she didn't. Understand, this time was different. This wasn't like the time he borrowed a few thousand for his failed car dealership. This wasn't like the time we paid his rent for 6 months. This was everything. I started thinking about what I could do legally. I talked to a lawyer friend of mine who told me the situation was complicated because Linda had given him the money willingly. But then he said something that stuck with me. "You may not be able to get the money back, Kenneth, but you can decide what happens from here. You can protect what's left." And that was when the idea first took root in my mind. If Linda could give away what we had without my consent, then maybe it was time I took steps to make sure she couldn't do it again. I started gathering documents, reviewing our accounts, and figuring out exactly how much damage had been done. Seeing the numbers in black and white made my stomach twist. We weren't broke, not yet, but the cushion we had worked for was gone. One big emergency, and we'd be in trouble. I didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to spend my final years worrying about whether we could afford to fix the roof or pay the medical bills. Linda noticed I was spending more time in the study, going through papers. She asked me once what I was doing, but I just told her, making sure we're not left with nothing. She rolled her eyes, as if I was being dramatic. That was the last straw for me. If she couldn't even acknowledge the gravity of what she'd done, then I couldn't trust her with our future. And once trust is gone, what else is there? I began quietly making arrangements. I changed certain accounts so that she couldn't access them without my signature. I updated my own financial plans. And then, late one night when I couldn't sleep, I started thinking about my will. We had always agreed that everything would go to each other and then to our kids. But now, I wasn't so sure. If she could give away my life's work once, what would stop her from doing it again after I'm gone? That thought chilled me. I realized I needed to make sure that the people I trusted, truly trusted, would take care of what I built. I didn't make any final decisions that night, but the seed was planted. And as the days passed, my resolve hardened. Linda thought this was just about her brother. She didn't realize that her actions had shifted something fundamental between us. This wasn't just a fight we get over. This was the beginning of a change that she wouldn't see coming. Asterisk, when morning came, I could barely look at her without feeling the tightness in my chest. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table just staring at the steam rising from my cup. She came in, wearing her robe, hair still messy from sleep, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe we could just talk. But then I remembered every word she had said, every justification, and every bit of trust that she had burned to the ground. She greeted me like nothing had happened, as if last night's storm never happened. I couldn't play along. I told her we needed to talk, really talk, and not the kind where she dismissed everything I said. She sat across from me, sighing, like I was the one inconveniencing her. I asked her if she truly understood what she had done. She didn't look me in the eye. She just said, "It's family, Kenneth. He needed it more than we did." That was the moment I realized there was no we in her decision. There was only her. She decided, without asking, without even considering the years of work we had put in together, to just hand it all away to her brother. And worse, she was standing by it. I asked her what exactly she thought we were going to do now, how we'd manage our bills, our future, everything we had mapped out. She said, "We'll figure it out." Those words, they felt like a slap. We'll figure it out? No, we already have figured it out. We spent decades building something, so we wouldn't have to figure it out again at our age. I reminded her we weren't in our 30s anymore. I reminded her that I was planning for retirement, for maybe taking those trips we talked about, for living a little without the constant pressure of work. She shrugged, almost annoyed. For the next few days, I kept my distance. I worked late, stayed out longer, and when I was home, I was quiet. I wasn't trying to punish her with silence. I just didn't have the energy to keep talking to someone who didn't see what she had done as wrong. But one night, while she thought I was asleep, I overheard her on the phone with her brother. She was telling him not to worry, that I'd come around eventually, and that he didn't need to pay us back anytime soon. That's when the reality set in. This wasn't just a bad decision, it was betrayal. She wasn't even trying. To fix it, the next morning, I went to see my lawyer. I didn't know what my end goal was yet, but I knew I had to understand my options. He laid them out for me, none of them pleasant, but at least they gave me some control back. I found out that because of how our accounts were set up, she technically had every legal right to do what she did. That was the part that made me sick. I had trusted her completely, never imagining I'd need to protect myself from my own wife. When I got home that night, she was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She asked where I'd been, and I told her straight. I went to see my lawyer. That got her attention. She put the magazine down and asked why, her voice suddenly sharper. I told her I needed to know where I stood, because I wasn't going to let her keep making decisions that affected both of us without my input. She tried to twist it, saying I was overreacting, that this was just a family matter. I didn't understand. I told her point blank, "No, what you did was theft. You took from us without asking, and you gave it away like it was nothing. She didn't like that word theft. She got defensive, saying I was insulting her, but I didn't back down. I told her that whether she liked the word or not, that's what it was. The tension in the house was unbearable after that. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was short and cold. I kept thinking back to all the years we'd been together, all the trust I had in her, all the decisions we'd made side by side. And now, in one move, she had not only taken the money, but also taken away the us that used to exist. Weeks went by, and nothing changed. Her brother didn't reach out, didn't offer to make things right, and she never pushed him to. That silence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to be fixed. Not by her, not by him. If I wanted any justice, if I wanted to reclaim even a fraction of what was mine, I was going to have to act. I started gathering documents, bank statements, transaction records, everything I could find. I kept it quiet. I didn't want her to know what I was planning because I needed to move without her getting in the way. I also began quietly moving certain assets into accounts she couldn't touch, making sure I had something secure if things went further south. The hardest part wasn't the money. It was coming to terms with who she had become. This was the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, the woman I had trusted with everything. But trust, I've learned, is fragile. Once it's broken, it never comes back the same way. One evening, she tried to break the ice. She made my favorite dinner, poured me a drink, and sat down next to me like old times. She said she missed how things used to be and wanted us to move past this. I looked at her and asked, "Move past it? How? You haven't even tried to fix it." She said she thought if we just focused on each other, the rest would sort itself out. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I told her straight, "I'm not the same man I was before you did this, and I'm not sure I can ever be again." Her face changed then. She realized I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't just a grudge I'd eventually let go of. And in that moment, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before: fear. She knew she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Asterisk, the night before I revealed my decision, I barely slept. My mind was a storm of emotions: anger, sadness, disappointment, but also a quiet resolve. I kept picturing all the moments I had chosen to forgive her, all the times I'd said, "It's okay, we'll work through this," because I believed our marriage was worth saving. But this was different. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate betrayal that cut into the core of what we built together. I thought about my father's face, how proud he was when he handed me the inheritance papers, telling me this money was for our future, for security, for the life we dreamed about. And now it was gone, given away, without my consent, to someone who had never lifted a finger to earn it. The morning sunlight crept through the curtains as I made coffee, my hand steady despite the emotional storm inside. When Margaret walked into the kitchen, she looked at me like she was bracing for another argument, but I was calm, almost unnervingly so. I handed her a cup of coffee and said, "We need to talk." She sat down slowly, eyes narrowing as if trying to read what I was about to say. I started by telling her how I had been feeling, not just about the money, but about everything. I told her I felt like I'd been taken for granted for years, like my voice in this marriage didn't matter. I explained that this wasn't just about dollars and cents. It was about trust, respect, and the fact that she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but I held up my hand. "Margaret," I said, my voice steady, "you gave away something that wasn't yours to give, and you didn't even talk to me first. Do you understand what that means? It means you've shown me, in the clearest way possible, that you don't value me as your partner." She was silent for a moment, then her eyes welled up. She said she thought I'd understand, that her brother needed it more than we did. I told her that wasn't the point. We could have helped him in a way that didn't destroy our financial safety. We could have made a decision together. But she didn't want a discussion, she wanted control. And now she had to live with the consequences. That's when I laid out the truth. I had already been to the bank. I had separated the remaining accounts. The deed to the house our house was now solely in my name. I had also spoken to a lawyer about legal separation and division of assets. Her face went pale, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She whispered, "You wouldn't." But I didn't have to raise my voice when I answered. I simply said, "I already have." For a long moment, the kitchen was silent, except for the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. I could see her mind racing, realizing that she had pushed me beyond the point of return. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. I told her I wasn't doing this to punish her, but to protect myself. I explained that I couldn't be in a marriage where my partner thought it was acceptable to make life-altering decisions behind my back. She started crying, telling me she was sorry, that she had acted out of love for her brother, that she hadn't meant to hurt me. But the truth was, she hadn't even considered me when she made the decision, and that hurt more than anything. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, awkward conversations, and cold silences in the house. Her brother never once called to apologize or offered to pay anything back. In fact, I learned from a mutual friend that he had been bragging about how family comes through when you need them. That lit a fresh fire in me. Family, I thought, bitterly, doesn't mean bleeding one person dry for another's comfort. It means mutual respect, and we didn't have that anymore. One evening, after the paperwork was nearly finalized, I sat alone in the living room with a glass of whiskey, staring at the family photos on the wall. There we were on our wedding day, smiling like we had the world ahead of us. There we were on vacation, laughing on a sunny beach. And there we were at Christmas, surrounded by friends and family, holding hands like nothing could break us. I realized in that moment that those versions of us were gone. Maybe they had been gone for a long time, and I was just now facing the truth. When the day finally came to sign the last of the documents, Margaret looked at me with red, tired eyes. She asked me one last time if there was any way to fix this. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a pang of sorrow for her, because I could see she finally understood what she had lost. But I shook my head. "Margaret," I said softly, "I gave you so many chances. This time, you went too far." After it was all over, I walked out of that office with a strange mix of relief and grief. I wasn't happy to have ended things, but I knew I had done what was necessary for my own peace of mind. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life. I moved some money into investments I had always wanted to try. I traveled. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during the marriage. And slowly, I began to feel like myself again, someone who could trust his own judgment, who could stand firm when it mattered. Margaret, I heard, moved in with her brother for a while. I don't know if they ever discussed what happened in detail, but part of me hopes she realized the full cost of her actions, not just financially, but emotionally. Because the truth is, money can be replaced. Trust can't. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, I want to leave you with this. Don't ignore the small red flags. Don't let love become an excuse for losing your voice in your own life. And above all, remember that respect in a relationship is worth more than any bank account. If you've ever been in a situation where someone crossed a line you thought was unbreakable, you know exactly what I mean. And if you haven't, I hope you never have to find out. If this story hit you in the heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more real stories that show the messy, complicated truth about relationships, family, and trust, make sure you stick around, because I've got plenty more to tell.